I am Fiona. I go to Big Picture South Burlington. I'm a senior, so I soon will not be going to Big Picture South Burlington, and that is in Vermont. And I am doing a tiny house project.
I'm Julie Torres. I'm a senior at Missisquoi Valley Union High School, and I'm a Harbor Freight Fellow, Vermont.
And I'm Jim Shields. I am an advisor. Actually, I'm Fiona's advisor at Big Picture South Burlington, which is a project-based, student-directed high school in Vermont, outside of the city of Burlington, Vermont.
Awesome. Hi, Kevin. Welcome. And I'm Beth White. I have the coolest job in the world. I get to support learners like these in creating cool learning opportunities in their communities. So next slide, please.
Oops. Did I just skip like 9?
Nope.
You're good.
There you go.
Okay, sorry.
So if anyone has thoughts about the keynotes or takeaways, you can encourage it, or you can paste in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and say something about it.
So let's stop sharing screen for a moment, and we're just going to take 5 minutes to do this.
I had a thought. It was right when I cut out to kind of come over here, so because we were getting some prep going. But someone was saying, she was saying about how she, like a student who is an electrician, might say, you know, how does this math impact like my interest in being an electrician? Like, how is this going to help me? And I thought that it's such a different way of thinking about what understandings that teachers will need, because, you know, in the past, it's always been kind of, I am the hoarder of the information and you have to kind of figure out as a student how to access it as a learner, right? And now it's like, I'm going to have to be able to reach out to those learners and say, you know, how is this learning very specific to Julie's interest in flying or Fiona's interest in building a tiny house? Or, you know, so it really demands, I think the teachers have been able to kind of rest on this kind of ownership of a certain aspect of the curriculum and never had to really understand how that curriculum might be meaningful personally to each one of their students individually. So that's a whole different level of expectation of teachers, which I think is a good one, but it's going to be a learning curve.
Mm-hmm. Charlie, did you have a thought about it?
Yeah, just quickly, I'm Charlie Plant. And I coordinate this Harbor Freight Fellows program from coast to coast and border to border. But what I didn't hear in the keynote speeches was the issue that the real gold standard of both learning and personal development for youth happens when they can pursue an interest in the real world with someone who's really good at it and that brings them along. And Fiona and Julie are absolutely great examples of that. And Harbor Freight is just focused on the trades, but it's true in every potential interest for youth.
For sure. I know.
Scott and Randy, by the way, thanks for joining us.
I know I really liked Caleb's, how he brought in kind of the larger systematic issues, because education reform is great, but that can only go so far if we're not addressing the other issues, which I thought was really important. Anyone else have any other thoughts about the keynotes? Any of them?
The whole idea of community accountability as a more authentic measure of what we need students to be able to do with us right now, of what they need now and going forward, the ways in which community accountability make students' lives purposeful and make learning relevant, I think builds resilience and allows us to engage with really complicated questions like, how do we fix those broken systems and how do we take on huge complicated problems like climate change?
Mm-hmm.
We have to stop being accountable to external systems that don't have any meaning for our communities.
And I'll piggyback on that point, Maggie, which is to say that, like in my neck of the woods, we just lost our biggest employer for the whole county. And so like traditionally, would that even be a topic that comes up at school? No, right? Because it doesn't fit neatly into a discipline area, right? You might try to have some understanding for some of the students whose parents lost their jobs or things like that. But is that going to be an opportunity to become a piece of their education? Like, how does a community respond when that happens? Is there a role we can play as educators and them as students in helping our community, handle that adversity? So I think that community-driven kind of accountability is super important and something we ought to be talking about, which I certainly will be after kind of hearing it. I kind of knew it, but like hearing them say it in the session really brought that front and center and had me thinking about that, our employer leaving. So that, and I posted in the chat the other thing, which is Dr. Wagner's little curiosity journal, like that's just this little nugget, but I thought that was really cool. So it'd be a cool thing for students to be doing and teachers alongside them. So.
All right. So those are definitely some awesome thoughts. I'm glad that I got to be there to see all the different keynotes. We are going to move on to Julie talking about her apprenticeship. Jim, if you want to go ahead and share your screen again, that would be awesome. And I am going to ask people to hold questions for the end of both of ours. We'll have a little Q&A session.
All right, so as I said before, hello, I'm Julie Torres. I'm a senior at Missisquoi Valley Union High School in Vermont, and I am currently working towards getting my private pilot's license, as well as becoming an aircraft maintenance technician. My passion is aviation, and being able to contribute to both of these is a goal of mine. I believe in leaving to learn, supporting opportunities for students to achieve self-directed and real-world learning. I'm here today to discuss my journey and how I learned to shift away from the conventional school-centered education system that asks young people to adapt to standardized one-size-fits-all approach to learning. Yeah.
You might have to let Jim know if you want to change slides, Julie.
All right, well, next slide, please. Pre-COVID. So my journey began early in the year. One of my administrators, who is actually on this call, Richard Barwin, helped me get in touch with my passion. He set me up with big picture learning design coach and inspiration, Beth White, and I soon became a Harbor Freight Fellow. I met my mentor, George Coy, and I began my personalized path towards my goals. When school was still in session, I would complete like my regular classes around 11 a.m. and I would head to the hangar to learn about my passion. I became familiar with the Sundays Mechanic Club, and I started attending regularly, and there I met so many amazing people who would help me grow in the future. So in these pictures here, we have Adam Eisel's mall. My first flight through Franklin County Airport, he actually landed me on the lake in front of my house, which is what's presented in that picture. And I don't have the language to describe to you how important that was to me and how amazing it really felt. Below we have Tony Sprans on the left, my first flight instructor at Franklin County Airport, and we have Mark Fraunhofer, who lets me help him work on his engine. I'm torquing some bolts in that picture down there. Next slide.
Not a bad first commute home, huh?
Right? It's amazing.
Like, hey mom, I'm home, and they're playing on the lake.
Right? That's actually the call I sent to my grandparents. So when school was still in session, I could tell you I felt pretty average, you know. I never felt like I was a good student. But since I've participated in Harbor Freight, my vision of how my education should look like has changed significantly. I love it. I love being part of such an amazing community, and I love learning. It doesn't feel like a chore, and it's something I'm really passionate about. So you've heard the saying, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And that's exactly how I feel. It fits perfectly. In the keynote, when, who was it? Gemma Stoddard was speaking, she made the point, who knew learning could be fun? And I agree with that very much. Next slide, please. So right before schoolwork started coming out for my classes, Beth was virtually by my side, and she helped me get back in the flow of learning. She helped me get my online Sporties Ground School started, as well as an online mechanics course with King Schools Online. And I started those, and I've been making lots of progress, and I love it. I also started regularly participating in Zoom calls with my mentor, George Coy, and I was able to experience what I would in a hangar online, which was very helpful. I also got to participate in other Zoom calls with other high school aviators around the state and even out of state. And it's pretty amazing to be part of a community with people around your age who also are passionate about the same things you're passionate about. During that time, I experienced some really powerful at-home learning. As some restrictions lifted, I got to go back to the hangar after some time. And my mentor and I practiced social distancing and other practices towards keeping us safe and healthy. And I feel I've achieved so much, and that I'm actually absorbing what I'm being told. Yeah, so in these pictures, I am, let's see, George taught me how to fabricate some metal. So I suppose that's what I'm doing in the first picture above.
And to jump in, he tried to make this piece and failed at it, and then told Julie to try it, and she made it perfectly. So she's being a little humble at the moment.
Oh my goodness. I really love being a help, and he's more than amazing. I'm so thankful to have these people in my life. In that second photo, an ultralight was in front of the hangar one morning when I pulled up, and it needed some work done to it. So Adam actually had me look at the brakes on the ultralight there. So that's what I'm doing in that photo. And I don't think that's gone out yet. I think it still needs some work, but.
You have 1 minute and 30 seconds, Julie.
Cool to be a part of it. Next slide, please. These are just some pictures. That's Beth White right there. And I'm wearing that t-shirt right now in the left photo. And there's my mentor, George Coy, in front of a Cessna 150. It was really nice out, and we got some good pictures. You know, in the next slide, this is my blog post I had written a while ago. I can post the link in the chat, I believe.
I just did it for you.
Okay, thank you. I had written this earlier in the COVID craze, I believe, and there I also talk about how I kind of conformed to my own needs and my learning style during COVID and learning at home. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Julie. Excellent. So now Fiona's going to share. Do you want to introduce Fiona, Julie?
Sure. So Fiona is another Harbor Freight Fellow who I've come to know, and their passion is, I suppose, building tiny houses. You might have to jump in and explain that better for me.
Basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have been in Big Picture South Burlington for the past 3 years, and all 3 of those years I have been working on my tiny house. And by working on my tiny house, I mean struggling with my tiny house. A lot of it has been, stuff I've had to do on my own, et cetera, and whatever. But I will talk about this a bit later. But I basically finally gotten the opportunity to actually really start working on it. But I still appreciate how over the past 3 years, I've been able to work on like the planning aspects and networking and whatever, and have the opportunity to do both Big Picture and Harbor Freight just through my local public school, which is awesome. So yeah, Jamie, if you want to go to the next slide. So, you skipped one. There we go. So I bought a very expensive trailer, and it took me, sadly not an exaggeration, about 6 months and $5,000 to get it up to Vermont. So that was wild. And this was pre-Harbor Freight Fellowship. So I had the support, of course, of all my advisors, my friends, but I was kind of doing this on my own in terms of like community participation. I had interviewed a lot of people over the years, but part of it was since I was under 18 at the time, I couldn't intern at a lot of places, and there were other difficulties in logistics that I faced. So this was a really big step for me to get this up to Vermont and finally have it there and real, and I could confirm it actually existed because I got it custom built for me by a company in Pennsylvania. Jamie, you can go to the next one now. Oop, you went backwards. There we go. So I joined the Harbor Freight Fellowship program, and I was doing my internship, whatever it's called, with our local Habitat for Humanity. My mentor, Chris Lane, was awesome. He would, call me over and be like, hey, you want to learn something? I'm like, of course I want to learn something, but also trusted me enough to just give me a task and let me do it. We were working on 2 projects. We had the one that you can see in the pictures here, which the top picture this is both the same house at the exact same time. The top picture is we cleared everything out so we could take a nice picture, and the bottom one is where we put all the cleared out stuff. So it's kind of a mess, but I thought that was funny, and that's the only picture I have from there because I didn't take any, which is problematic. But we also had another house we were working on, which that was more towards the finished stages than this one was even. And even though I joined them kind of towards the later part of both these projects, I still learned a lot, whatever, and I was doing things like hanging doors and doing flooring, sanding sheetrock, spackling nail holes, which was thrilling, and made a railing for the porch, which was really cool and involved, some fun math. And I would have probably joined them on the start of their next project, which would have been more applicable. But as it was, I was just kind of learning things in the opposite order of what you normally would do. But it was awesome because it was my first time doing proper building stuff since I did sets when I was in middle school in my freshman year. And, building the sets was awesome, whatever, and I stopped doing it for a variety of reasons. But I finally got to, hop back into it, and it was great just being able to, show up on a construction site and be like, yes, there's sawdust everywhere, this is great. And I didn't realize how much I missed it until I actually was there again, so that was awesome. And since I was stressing about the tiny house, because even though I had the trailer, it's hard because I wasn't doing anything tangible with it. I can deal with nailing something together, but the planning is just a lot to deal with. It was nice to be able to actually go do something. So yeah, Jamie, you can go on to the next one. So that brings us to everything getting shut down and the apocalypse, which has weirdly given me a perfect opportunity to work on this. I had as I said earlier, the trailer delivered up to Vermont, and then everything happened, and I was like, hey, it's a great place to build a tiny house, because in Vermont, I couldn't keep it at our house because we rent and other reasons. So I was like, hey, what if I go live with my dad down in Maryland? And it all happened very quickly, but we planned it, and he drove up, and the second picture is us driving on a very long drive with the trailer down to Maryland. And it's just, I think it's very interesting, because I wouldn't have had this opportunity if not for the apocalypse, because he wasn't going to be moving to Maryland. It's a long story, but basically he wouldn't be here and I wouldn't have been able to be here. So I think it's just a nice opportunity, and actually gives me a chance to build it. I've also been doing a weekly call with the Harbor Freight Fellowship gang, so Beth and Charlie and sometimes a few other people and Jim. And we, I had started the Harbor Freight Fellowship doing my work with Habitat for Humanity, and then I couldn't do that anymore because they stopped building. And sorry, people are yelling in my house. I had the opportunity to basically morph it into something that would fit with this, because I was doing it so that I could learn the skills to build my tiny house, and then I made it into something of actually me building my tiny house, which I thought was super awesome, and I've had the support of all those people. And Jim, if you go to the next slide, I've been working on a blog post for that, and that will just allow me to, actually get the word out there. I always tell people about it, and they're like, that's so cool. I'm like, yeah, I wish I could send you somewhere to read more about it, but I don't have anything right now. But I just think that's been a really great opportunity, how I get to come down here to Maryland, and now I'm sitting here and actually be able to build my house now. And I'm still, talking with my mentors. That other picture of me measuring the trailer, it looked staged. It wasn't, I promise. Was me measuring it so I could send the measurements to my mentor, Chris, so we could work together on making plans for the trailer. And so even though we're literally in different states now, he can still help me out. And that is most of that.
Nice. So I'm sure you all have some really great things you're thinking about right now after hearing these two phenomenal human beings share a bit about their passion. And we'd like to open up for questions. Please definitely put some in the chat or shout them out. We can read them out for you if you're feeling shy about speaking on Zoom.
I know someone had a question for Julie earlier, which was when you were talking about your planes, was what kind of seaplanes? I don't know what that means, but I'm assuming you do.
I believe that was from Michael, and I think that was referring to the photo of it,
Is Julie freezing a bit, or is it just
I think
me?
she froze.
Okay.
I can jump in. That was Adam's Mall, and she actually landed on the ice. He put some skis on that airplane and landed on the ice, which is outside of her grandparents' house, which was pretty cool.
So does that mean it wasn't a seaplane? It was a plane with wheels, with
ski plane, I guess. I don't know.
Ski plane. Okay.
Plane with skis. What other questions do you have for our learners? We have two amazing Harbor Freight Fellows here. We have some advisors on the line. What are you thinking about? What are you wondering?
I
have a question.
Learn more about how the coalition, big picture, Harbor Freight, these wonderful students, how did they all get together how does that work?
Great question. And I think, Teresa, you also had a question too. Did you want to say your question as well, and we can get them back to back?
Sure. So this could be, I would love for both the youth learners and their advisors to give us their perspective on what is their thinking around how to take these experiences to a broader group of youth learners and a broader group of advisors and teachers. Like, how do we make, what is your opinion in terms of, or what are your ideas around how do we make this more the norm, you know, as opposed to the exception?
For sure. Also, Julie's back. Yay.
I'm sorry, we've got my whole family on the internet right now.
Thanks.
How far did we get? How much did you hear? And also, what did I miss?
Well, Beth managed to finish her question up, and then Maggie asked kind of how the whole gang got together, and Teresa asked, I can't quite remember the whole thing, but I think how we can shift all this awesome stuff to, instead of being the, you know, the unconventional thing, more the norm. And if I'm paraphrasing wrong, then either of you can butt in.
Or how do you scale it out?
Paraphrased it nicely in the chat for us.
There you
Thank
go.
you, Ben.
How do we bring these to our communities? How do we bring like big picture learning or Harbor Freight learning ideas into our communities?
I know Jim and maybe even Kevin might be able to talk about how our school is essentially, even though Big Picture is just a small part of the bigger South Burlington school, we've got like 20 students. The bigger school has about 1,000. When we're coming back in the fall, I'm not coming back because I'm a senior, but when everyone's coming back in the fall, it's going to have to look different, and it's kind of going to be more towards the Big Picture model.
By necessity. Yeah, Charlie, I mean, does Charlie want to start with, because that's, I mean, the Harbor Freight Fellowship kind of came to us via Charlie through Beth.
So Big Picture partnered with Harbor Freight Tools for Schools to support youth going into the trades. And Big Picture, of course, is the perfect partner because we've been building kids out in the world with mentors for over 25 years now. We know how to do that. And so we created a program, and there's a website, and that's where the application process is. Again, it's one of those propositions where it's for those who want it, not necessarily those who need it. And what we found out is—
Shirley, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
Are you Big Picture Learning or Harbor Freight? I'm having trouble figuring out, like,
Sure.
South Burlington High School, Big Picture, Harbor Freight. How does that coalition come together?
Sure.
Is there a community-wide role? Like,
Okay, so Big Picture Learning is an umbrella education thinker that helps schools adopt a certain set of principles, at the center of which is getting kids out in the world to pursue their interests with professionals. That's the core of Big Picture. That's the personalization. And Harbor Freight Tools has given us a grant and funding to support that particular model for those youth who want to go into the trades. And so, Beth, we were at a conference last summer, and Beth brought the people from New Hampshire that she knew, the educators, to talk about it. And they said, oh, we'd love to do this with some of our kids. And that's how it got going in that part of the country.
And Vermont too. And I put some links to Big Picture and Harbor Freight Fellows in the chat. We obviously don't have a huge amount of time to dive into these questions because what can you do in 45 minutes? But these are great questions. And what we'll do is we're going to save the chat and we can respond to all of your questions. Later on in the presentation, we're going to ask you to add your email address to the chat if you'd like to hear from us or get a copy of the notes in the chat. Okay. So we're a little bit out of time for the question and answer section. Jim, do you want to bring us back to the slide deck? And
yes.
Thank you.
And I just answered Randy's question in the chat based on my 10 years of experience in Big Picture.
Thanks, Jim.
So, you know, we can also answer some of the questions there too. So,
So these are really great questions, and we want to give you all a chance to generate some more and also to chat in a smaller group setting in a breakout session. So if you'll hit the next slide, Jim, we're going to ask you to consider 2 questions in an 8-minute period. Julie, do you want to, I could just do this part. So first question, first 4 minutes is going to be, what strategies do you use to get to know what your learners' interests and goals are? How do you identify and match resources in your community that allow your learners to pursue their interests? And then the question that was already asked by the group, how do we spread this? How do we make this the way of learning going forward? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste these questions in the chat. I'm also going to put them into your breakout rooms so that your working memory doesn't have to hold them. What I'm going to ask is that you take notes during your session, and then when we come back together, paste those notes in the chat, and then more of us will be able to learn from what you discussed and what you were thinking about. I forgot to introduce Richard. So he's a work-based learning coordinator at Missisquoi Valley Union High School in Swanton, Vermont, which is almost on the border of Canada.
Okay.
Welcome back. I hope you had a wonderful breakout session. We're going to encourage folks to put your notes into the chat if you would. And if you're feeling a little bit brave, maybe share some takeaways that your group discussed. And we're going to set a timer for 8 minutes here.
So just while people are, putting their notes in the chat, I hopped in a group, and Maggie was saying, specifically in reference to people in Puerto Rico who were basically being forced to move because of, floods, hurricanes, etc., that they were instead like, no, we don't want to move. And so it basically ended up being bringing the solution to them instead of making them go out of their way because of something they can't control, which I thought was neat.
I was wondering if Fiona had considered disaster housing.
I'm not, but I'm not opposed to it.
Well, great, Mega. It's a good question. I know that Fiona has always been really interested in kind of zero waste, ecological issues, a lot of the troubling aspects of capitalism. They've been kind of recurrent themes for Fiona, so that's a natural fit. It's a good idea.
Sure is. Yep.
Yeah. Anyone else have other thoughts? Oh yeah, Julie's back again.
Hi.
Welcome back.
I'll just jump in. I was gonna type in, I totally failed on taking notes. I was just enjoying the conversation, so I apologize.
You're forgiven.
But just a couple of highlights for me. We're just talking about the importance of relationships and how we cultivate the network of relationships with people in school communities, and there's just the essential nature of building out those networks in order to support the diversity of learners is enormous, and it is a hard thing to scale. It's a real shift in priority from the inward looking at a school, at a classroom, at a discipline, to a real outward looking community-based, relationship-based role, and this didn't get talked about in our session, but that's a big shift for a lot of educators, and potentially really uncomfortable for a lot of people, but really, really important if we're going to support this kind of learning. So
I know in my graduation speech, I kind of touched on like a lot of this is community, both in big picture and everything, and just having the community of being one of the Harbor Freight Fellows has been immensely helpful, and just the weekly calls and everything for both accountability and resources, etc. If anyone else has any other.
Well, I just want to jump in. I feel like this was timely and exciting. I remember with Julie's blog post, I don't know if you want to talk, Julie, about how the reception you got nationally, internationally, about what you wrote.
So yeah, I don't Beth, you might have to help me out on this one, but I don't recall how many picked it up. I know quite a few did, and I was pretty excited. I'd get a text and I like, hey, is it okay if this website, this organization, like post your blog
Education
post?
Reimagined, Up for Learning, like they just, the 99s, which is the aviation club that Amelia Earhart started, Aero Club of New England. I mean, the list like just goes on and on. Folks were just wanting to hear about like this way to learn, it was really interesting. I don't know what that meant for you, Julie, as a learner, but
I think we all kind of feel the same, possibly. I know while still in school, I wanted change, but I didn't really know how to go about it. And I think by doing this, we're kind of giving more and more communities like the language to kind of speak up and get in action and start changing things,
Can I answer, kind of go back to one of the questions that was earlier, just as my perspective related to this, and I want to build on what Ben was saying about relationships, is that when someone was asking like, well, how do you get it from, Charlie doing this awesome work at the high level with big picture learning and Harbor Freight up at this level of like, hey, we're going to fund this big fellowship and make it available. When it came down to Richard's level and my level in schools, we hear about this, and because we have good relationships where we know our students well, we're able to go and then the students trust us. I can go to someone like Fiona and say, hey, Fiona, this sounds perfect for you. It isn't a matter of, we got this great fellowship and someone posted it on a bulletin board somewhere and some kid happened to pull off a little sticky note and maybe they managed to find it. I mean, this is really about it's not going to work with just someone putting some money out there for grants and hoping someone sees a poster on the wall. It's going to be us knowing our students and getting in communication with them so they trust us and we trust them, and then we can connect them to these opportunities. So it really is all about that small, well-known relationship in community with your learners.
yes, there's some good stuff in the chat about reciprocal accountability. I love that. So I just wanted to jump in and say that I read the guiding principles from the CDC the other day, and I'm putting the link in the chat. And they have this guiding principle here that is basically saying, calling for small in-person classes, activities, and events, groups of students that stay together and with the same teacher throughout and across school days and do not mix. So this kind of sounds like
sounds awfully big picture.
Big picture, Harbor Freight, one-on-one, learning in your community. So as you move forward into thinking about the fall, maybe take heart with some of these examples. We'd also like to encourage folks, if you, again, want to have a copy of this chat or want us to reach out to you, please share your email address with us and we can be in touch. But I'm going to stop talking. So other questions for our learners, our advisors?
Just a quick one is that Julie and Fiona are extraordinary. But the thing is, every kid has something in them that's extraordinary to bring out, and that's our job.
I totally agree with you, Charlie. And again, we ran out of time before. I'd really love for Julie and Fiona to just say from their hearts how they believe we can get more kids into the type of learning that they're doing. What do you think, the two of you? In terms of your friends, your peers, more kids across Vermont, across the entire country. How can we get them doing more of this stuff based on the experience?
Yeah, I think just part of it is you go up to a high school kid and you're like, what if you could do whatever you wanted and it could count for school? A lot of us, it's so ingrained in us to be like, that's too good to be true. Like, that's not really school. And we're like, no. So I think just kind of being like, you can do whatever you want. No, really. In fact, I mentioned this in like my blog post and my speech. My first interview with Big Picture, just to see if it'd be a good fit for me. I was like, okay, but can I build an entire tiny house? And Jim was like, yeah. And I'm like, great, amazing, love it.
I just want to throw out there something Richard said that I don't want to lose because it's kind of a reality that we don't really talk about. And he was mentioning that idea of like, we don't have, the funding is so weird that in terms of everyone's talking about personalized learning and one-on-one and relationships and all this, but the funding structures are still set up for, here is a big chunk of money for all the students in your school to divide. And, so I just, we've had to be really creative about saying like, so Fiona, you want to build a tiny house, maybe you need to take a workshop at Yestermorrow that might cost $200. How do I budget for one student to take that one workshop? Like the funding structures, and it just becomes this kind of hurdle that we have to get over. And I think our coordinator, Kevin Downey's been great about like saying yes to a ton of stuff, finding ways to get money to kids. But we have to do a lot of work against our own. I don't want to say against, because they're saying, here's your big pool of money. They just don't have any way for us to access it. It's like saying like, here, spend all you want, but it's in kroners and we only take dollars here. I mean, it just feels like that kind of yes, but. And I think Richard had a good point about and it's not just money, I don't want to say that, but how do we incentivize it for business people who often, are spending money to take our students in. I've had people, blacksmiths and luthiers and all these people say like, oh, I would love to have an intern, but it costs me $1,000 every time I have an intern because I really want them to use the materials and get to know what it's like. So that's a big part of it. And we were also talking in our group about how do we make them feel like we're not just shoving the kid out of the bus into their business and saying like, hey, well, go ahead and educate our kids. How do we really have them the businesses trust that it's a partnership where there is in-school learning and it's supported in school, and that it's a partnership, not a kind of foisting off of the learner into the community.
Thanks, Jim. I just wanted to also give, that's a great point. Really important questions are being raised. This is just the beginning of a conversation, I hope. I just want to give Julie last word around Teresa's question about inspiring other youth, and then we'll say goodbye.
All right, there was a couple ways as you were speaking, Jim. It's kind of unfortunate to watch my classmates as a student myself kind of struggle and like learn the habit of almost hating learning because you're taught so poorly and you're forced to stick with it. And I think this would be an amazing opportunity for so many students if we could figure out how to do it right. But so this kind of mixes with my personal beliefs as well. I don't really believe that anything's permanent in life except change. And I think now would be an amazing time to change. And, it's going to be hard. Jim was talking about funding and, how we're going to go about this. And I know it's going to be hard, but I think it'll be worth it. Whatever we put into the students, I think Beth is a great example. She's taking so much time and she's really helping me out, and I want to do that too. When I grow up, I want to be able to help students achieve what they want to do, like get going in their passion, and I want to help them get there as Beth helped me. And I think, good karma.